I hope I'm recording. Recording
Yes,
has
it
started.
says-
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yep.
Recording
Lovely.
is kind of flagged, so
Got it. Good. Excellent.
I've got some good news on my social event I organised at the Balmoral tonight. We've got 15 turning up, which, I mean, half of them are retired, and I'd reckon that the average age would probably be 70 or 75, but you know, there's nothing wrong with that, is there, Murray?
don't
No, not at
overexcite.
all. So you're doing an AFI thing tonight, Chris?
It's just a social get together. There's no presentation. It's just getting together at the pub and having a meal and a beer.
But with the Foundry crew?
Yeah.
Oh,
they're all
awesome.
Foundry crew. Yeah.
Nice.
First one for the year, so yeah.
It's important to keep that engagement and interaction going along. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I thought that was the main function of
AFI.
AFI.
There's a smattering of learning and education that we throw in every now and then to keep the kids interested.
Yeah?
Come on. Yeah.
When does that happen?
You mustn't be paying it. You must be nodded off at the time.
Yeah. Ooh, Alex
All
is
right.
coming.
Okay. This is our presenter. I'll let you do the greetings, Alan.
You're mute, Alan.
You're still
G'day, Alex. G'day, Alex. How
G'day,
are
Alex.
you? Yeah,
Good, how are you?
glad you could join us. Good. Yep. We got around the table. We've got WA, South Australia, and Victoria represented. Alex, you might recognise one or two faces. I think well, at least someone from your company has met with one or two people around the table. So yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Look, we may get some stragglers join in, but yeah, can't be sure with these sort of things. It's always anyone's guess. But yeah. Yep.
Just while we start, Alex, do you want to practice sharing your screen? Are you able to? Do I need to give you some kind of permission, or are you right to do that?
It depends on the invite, but I'll try it now and see if it can just happen straight away. It looks like there aren't any issues. So yeah, I've started sharing now.
Perfect.
So you should be able to.
Yeah, you got the wrong window though.
Yeah. I'll open that up. You can
Front
see that
page.
there.
Yeah,
in
cool.
due course.
Lovely.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's right.
Perfect.
I'll stop sharing now to avoid any confusion, and then just get stuck straight into it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, we just got another couple of people don't have access. Oh, okay.
Just some features. What?
Yeah, I know. That's a new one for me. Interesting. Yeah. Well, we've got 1 more minute to go, and then, if everyone's okay, I think we will try and kick it off on time. Alex, I'm not sure how long your presentation is likely to go. I can't recall, so forgive me if I omitted that
15,
detail.
20 minutes. Really,
okay.
It's it's certainly not going to drag on for too long.
No, that's not a problem. And then we'll keep the chat, just while we're talking, we'll keep the chat box open, and maybe Alan, if you want to take control of asking the questions and introducing those as they come along. Alex has suggested that he'll let us sort of ask questions as we go rather than waiting to the end. So pop your questions in the chat box, and we can address those as we go along.
Might be a good idea for people to mute while they're listening.
I'll mute everyone. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
If I can. Oh, well, actually, if everyone can mute themselves, that's easier, because then it's sometimes difficult to unmute if I do it. So I'm thinking my computer says 6 o'clock. So shall we kick off? All right. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight, or coming to your computer screen, whether you're still at work or at home, or however the case may be. In the middle of winter, particularly in Melbourne, and probably Ballarat too, it's nice to be able to have a meeting and have some face-to-face with people, being in your own home. So thanks a lot for coming tonight. Tonight, our presentation is by Alex Townsend. Alex, give us a wave. From Choice Energy, and Alex is going to be talking to us about the energy market outlook for 2024 and beyond. A little bit about Alex. Alex Townsend is the partnerships manager at Choice Energy and draws upon a diverse background cultivated through various roles within the company. He's obviously been with the company for a while. Transitioning from sales to his current role, Alex possesses a nuanced understanding of the energy sector's complexities. In his capacity, Alex plays a crucial role in navigating the intricate landscape of strategic partnerships. Through his tenure, he has developed a keen ability to identify synergies and cultivate alliances that drive mutual benefit and innovation. And his primary focus is, of course, assisting Australian businesses in reducing energy consumption and costs, which is what he's here to talk to us about tonight. So without further ado, I am going to mute myself and I will hand it over to you. If everyone can just remember to mute themselves and pop questions in the chat box if you've got anything, and Alan will ask those questions as we go along.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber. Well, I'll get stuck straight into it and get straight into the slide deck. As Amber said, if there are any questions, I'm sure Alan will read them out as we go. I'll have a little bit at the end of each slide if anyone does have any questions that we can run through there. Just before I get into this, a quick little disclaimer, which basically, this content, some of it is opinion on us. It's not legal advice by any means, and action based on these opinions. There's that liability notice there, and just a short little disclaimer, because we don't want to get into a mess with anything there, but that's just all needed for hearsay anyway. So a quick little bit about Choice Energy. So there's probably a few of you that wouldn't have heard of us or know what we do. So we're Australian owned and operated with over 50 staff with offices in Melbourne and Brisbane. And we've been going for a little over 10 years now and have 12,000 business customers on our books in Australia. We've supported a range of industries across the country. Basically, our ideal customer is if they pay an energy bill, we can help them. And one of our key industries is manufacturing. So we have helped over 2,500 manufacturing businesses, and we've helped them throughout those 10 years save over a projected $25 million each year on their electricity bills. So it's an industry that we're pretty well suited to. It's a heavily energy intensive industry and one that has a lot of complexities, but also a lot of opportunities around there to be able to help, I guess, negate that operational cost that is the energy bill as it continues to rise, as it has risen for the last 3 or 4 years, especially as well. So the top issues facing businesses, look, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in the issues that you guys are facing at the moment. These are just a few ones that are pretty much across the board when we speak with all different types of industries. Labour is a huge one, shortages and costs there. Obviously, inflation is pretty well talked about, and interest rates alongside those ones as well. But energy costs are one that is often spoke about a lot in the media, but there isn't too much information as to, I guess, why energy costs do go up. And it kind of doesn't really have anything to do with those points above either. It's its own market. And I'll show in the next slide as well, I guess, the factors that are at play with when it comes to energy rates and I guess, how it affects the end consumer, which is you guys when it's sorting out your next electricity contract in terms of the rate that you are going to be paying. And it does make up about 50% of your electricity bill, the energy rates. And so it's really important and crucial to be able to time the market well. And I'll go into this next slide now as to, I guess, the variance that we have in the Australian energy market, even in the last 5 or 6 months. So you can see that the graph there on the right-hand side shows basically the volatility that we've had since, well, basically the last 12 months, but especially since the start of February. So we had record low rates, 2-year record low rates in the start of February. And that was basically off record solar and wind generation that we hadn't seen before. Since then, the market's gone pretty crazy, mainly around Eraring Power Station, which is Australia's largest coal-fired power station. It had units go offline, and there were interconnectors that ran at low efficiencies because of that, coupled with low wind and solar generation from pretty much the start of April onwards, has seen about a 40% increase in the wholesale energy market between now and the start of February. So basically what we see there is it's the new normal, this sort of volatility, especially when we're looking at the seasonal changes as well. So obviously come summer months, we're going to see some more solar generation. So naturally that's going to drive the price down, but we're still really heavily reliant on coal. As you can see there, that when the sun isn't shining and the wind's not blowing, it causes rates to skyrocket quite sharply. And so it's really important to be able to understand when this market is at a healthy point in time to secure your next contracts, because your contracted rates are pretty much go off exactly what you see in the market there and going to be reflective of when you go to market at any point in time. Another key point to note is that the government's coal power cap is expiring at the end of this month. That was brought on at the end of 2022 when we had Russia invading Ukraine and the market went up 300% in the space of a few weeks. That's set to expire. We don't expect there to be too much changes because of the coal power cap expiring, but we do expect the volatility to remain pretty consistent, especially over the winter months and going into the end of the year. So why should you guys care about the market volatility and how it impacts you? So as I said before, the wholesale energy market that you saw in that previous slide directly impacts large energy users contracts. So C&I contracts, as a rule of thumb, if you're spending $2,500 a month, you should be on a commercial and industrial energy contract. And the timing of when you secure the rates for those contracts are directly impacted by the market volatility or the market area at that point in time. So the volatility itself also highlights the lack of control that the government really has over lowering energy costs for businesses. We saw in the budget announcement $300 energy bill relief for residential customers and a $325 bill relief for some selected businesses. I think it was about 1 million Australian businesses would get a $325 relief. The fact that rates have gone up about 40 to 50% the last 2 years, so you're spending thousands, if not tens of thousands more a year than what you were 2 or 3 years ago on your energy bills, means that the $325 rebate is essentially next to nothing. That, coupled with the fact that the government is paying Origin to keep Eraring Power Station open beyond its closure date, so it was due to close next year. It's going to be extended for at least another 2 years, and that is going to cost the New South Wales taxpayer upwards of $500 million. So we hear all of this in the news of lowering rates or trying to lower rates or bringing in rebates, and the reality of the situation is that the government doesn't have much control, and we're still really, really reliant on coal as a baseload power source, because right now wind and solar just is not reliable enough with the amount that we've got in our grid right now. And the end result of that is the New South Wales taxpayer paying up to $500 million over the next 2 years to keep a coal power station open and paying Origin that money essentially. I'll touch on this briefly. So I'm not too sure how many are across Peter Dutton's announcement today. It does have a pretty big impact on Australian businesses, in future. I'll touch on that soon, but essentially the energy transition and what it looks like. I think it's pretty important to, have an outline of what the foreseeable future looks like from an energy transition point of view, and especially what the next 5 to 10 years looks like in terms of an immediate future. So we're going to continue to be really reliant on coal as a baseload power, and from that, it means that renewables for the foreseeable future just aren't going to deliver cost-effective electricity or cheaper electricity than, I guess, what the government's going to speak about. So you can see there that I took a snippet from an article of the CEO of Alinta, which is one of Australia's biggest electricity retailers, essentially saying that there's a practicality versus an idealistic way to go through this transition. So the reality of the situation is that regardless of where it comes from, Australians are going to be paying more on aggregate for their electricity over the next few years because of this renewable transition. So you can see that quote there that I took from Jeff Dimery is, whether we pay through the tax base or pay the large upfront cost of EV or batteries and solar, we're paying more for electricity from the grid, where we'll all pay more in aggregate. So I think it's a key thing to note that the government's not going to come in to save anyone when it comes to these higher energy costs. It's very, very much up to the proactivity of businesses in Australia, especially those that are high energy users, to understand that and understand that they need to be proactive themselves in sourcing energy contracts, contesting the charges on their bills, everything like that, that look, we're able to help with. But reality is, at the moment, there's probably 80% of Australian businesses that don't do this. And especially for the next 5 to 10 years, it is something that businesses that don't do it are probably going to fall behind in terms of their operational costs getting out of hand. I don't want to go too far off topic, but Krenos Manufacturing in March, I think, borderline went under or has filed for bankruptcy or insolvency or some sort. A large part of that was because of the gas and electricity rates getting out of control and being unmanaged by them. So it's gotten to a point now where if you can't manage your electricity or gas contracts effectively, it might be the difference between businesses staying operational and profitable or not. And so it's really important to understand how important it is to time the market to make sure that those operational costs stay as low as possible, because they can be controlled to a certain extent. I will touch on nuclear now. So Peter Dutton did come out with his nuclear plan in terms of an energy transition. I'll touch on it very quickly, and I've done some research in terms of what it looks like. So essentially, the National Energy Market, and abbreviated the NEM, requires about 50 gigawatts of generation per hour to power homes and businesses. Coal right now produces 22 gigawatts of that, with the rest being made up by gas, brown coal, as well as renewable sources as well. The proposal by Peter Dutton with the nuclear power stations looks to be about 6 gigawatts of power generation. So it's not enough to actually replace the coal that is being produced right now in terms of the generation needed for the national energy market. So something to consider, that, you know, there's other things in terms of costs and, you know, whether it's the right thing to do morally with regards to targets and everything like that. The reality of the situation is that the proposal with the nuclear sites that would, I guess, come into operation, not only are they probably 10 to 15 years away, but they also will not generate enough electricity to cover the coal that it is meant to essentially replace. So it's something to note. Reality of it is that it's further than a decade down the track. And so, look, I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but it is important to stay in the here and now and what that means in terms of the market volatility and where we are right now, and essentially controlling the controllables around that. I'll touch on quickly as why solar is good for business here. So I've spoken a fair bit about the market volatility. Solar is a great way to help reduce your reliance on the grid by essentially having a power station on your roof to produce your own power. Now, a lot of you probably already have either one, looked at solar, or two, already have solar at your sites already. And hopefully you are seeing the benefits of what a good solar system can produce. not only, I guess the word around solar is that it's expensive, and the reality of that is that it doesn't actually have to require a large budget to install solar in the first place. So it can actually be a cash flow neutral or cash flow positive solution if it does stack up for a business. And by being cash flow neutral, or in this case cash flow positive, it means that the savings on the energy bill generated from having the solar system up there are going to be more than what the monthly finance repayments would be towards the system. So if you're going to be paying that money towards your energy retailer anyway, you may as well looking at something that is A, cheaper than continuing to pay your electricity, but B, is also paying for an asset that you're going to have after those repayments are finalised. And so in terms of where the energy market is now from a rates perspective, and being 40, 50% higher than what they were during COVID times, which we saw 5-year lows, exploring solar at the very least is a no-brainer. Then there's also some added benefits so you've got acquisition of government rebates, which will look to pay for about 10 to 15% of the system. Tends to be rule of thumb in terms of what the government will chip in for it. We also
Alex,
have yes.
I'll just break in there now. Chris Grant has a question. Chris, if you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question, please.
Yes, very quickly. Does this analysis include battery storage of power? Which obviously you have, using power in the evenings, and battery storage, or not? Is that with or without battery storage? Let's get my question.
Yeah, so this is without battery storage. We don't recommend a battery ourselves because it's not a viable commercial decision for a lot of businesses right now, because the return on investment isn't there. You might already have a battery at your site where this probably doesn't. This specific scenario here is without a battery. So the way that we fit a system is to essentially offset as much of the daytime usage as possible. What we try to avoid is feeding as little back to the grid. What we try to avoid is making sure that the system itself is not feeding anything to the grid at all, because realistically, you don't see any really good returns when you do have a system that is feeding back into the grid. If you do have a system that does feed back along into the grid, then a battery might be a thing to look at further reducing your reliance on the grid, so that when the sun isn't shining, you can use that excess storage there. Does that answer the question?
Yep, it looks like Chris is happy there, Alex. So yeah, carry on.
Cool. Awesome, thank you. So before that question, I was going to touch on the performance guarantee dot point that you can see there that probably doesn't make too much sense. Essentially, what we have in our business cases and contracts and proposals that we do for businesses that we install solar for is we guarantee the performance of the system as it is outlined in the business case. And if the system doesn't produce what we say it's going to produce in the business case, then we pay the difference on the energy bill. So through that, you have essentially no risk where and we've heard these stories before of solar companies whacking on a system, not turning it on properly, or system the inverter not working, or something like that, and then the solar company being nowhere to be found. We've got skin in the game. So if the system doesn't produce what we say it's going to produce, we'll pay the difference on the energy bill and pay you cash. So we've got a vested interest to make sure that that solar system is producing as well as what we said it would in the business case. There's also warranties on equipment and the like. That's not too indifferent to what other solar companies are going to be able to do for you. It's going to support your sustainability objectives. I think that is pretty self-explanatory with regards to you're going to be generating your own power instead of getting it from the grid. And so by doing that, you're going to be offsetting more carbon and the like, which is going to help towards ESG goals that may or may not be relevant in the industry right now, but I know that there's more and more industries that are having to comply with certain ESG requirements, and solar can certainly help you with that. And then the final point is that, yeah, not only are we a solar company, but we're also an energy consultancy that can look at the rates that you continue to pay from the excess usage that you do have and make that bill a little bit less for you in the meantime.
Yeah, I'll just break in there, Alex.
Yep.
So I'd assume everyone around the table understands ESG being environment, sustainability, and governance.
Yep.
And there's a comment in the chat from Brett that a battery is likely to pay back more from the FCAS market than reliance on the grid. Would you like to comment on that?
So I haven't, it's the first I've ever heard of the FCAS market. Brett, if you could chime in there and help me understand what that is, so that I might be able to provide a little bit more context there.
Sure. So everyone would understand that the pricing in the NEM is priced on a 5-minute interval, and it's bidded in, etc. But there's two criteria. Number one, supply. Number two, the key criteria for our EMO to keep all the lights on is to ensure that the frequency is within a certain band. So it's about, I think it's 50.15 hertz to 49.85. Anyway, that's beyond it's just within a band. So frequency control is effectively either dropping power out or adding power in, particularly with the increase in renewables, to keep that frequency within control. So our foundry has been part of the turning power off when requested as part of that frequency control. On the battery side, the only reason that we've looked at batteries is more the other side of that market. So you can bid in as a generator and add power in to improve the frequency, or you take power out. So it's that frequency control, and effectively you can get paid. Just trying to think of it's a 1 second, a 6 second, and I think it's a 1 minute market. So, and that's the ability, not for how long you can do that, for how quickly you can enact that, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's where that comes in. So
is that with regards to the battery and retailers or the network being able to draw power from the battery?
Yeah, so when we get called upon, so at the moment we can turn our furnaces off in less than a second. So when we get called upon, so we use an aggregator, and they will bid in, say, okay, we can bid in for the next 5 minutes, or whatever their interval is. We can turn off 6 meg if you require us to. And if I email call upon you, you need to be able to do that within that time frame. On the other side of the market, which we're not part of because we're not a generator, it's the same concept. So they want either power in or power out, to not as a matter of anything other than modifying the frequency as opposed to the megawatts themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
No, that does make, and I think to go back to the start in terms of the ROI on batteries being separate to that, I think I agree with you there. If I've understood you correctly, that's where having a battery, if those circumstances take place, are going to be useful and pay for themselves, essentially, in that respect.
Yeah, effectively we're still looking at it, because even with what we do here, we're still looking at a 4-odd-year payback, because as you would know, the batteries are bloody expensive for anything of a reasonable size. So we can't still make it make sense, but that would be where most of your earnings would come from, as opposed to just trying to stay away from the peaks, if that makes sense. Anyway.
No, that does make sense, and thanks for your input there. That's useful information.
I guess that FCAS example is just an example of the complexity that we get as we increase the percentage of renewables into the system, which is very difficult to convey to Joe Blow public, to make Joe Blow public understand the complexities around, how we generate the mix of how we generate our electricity will have a profound effect on how it's managed.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
And that's half the battle in terms of not only what we do, but I think also what the whole energy industry as a whole tries to get out to the public is just this information piece on it's not as easy as getting a peak and off peak rate, and that all takes care of itself, or there's so many factors that play into it, and especially when you're looking at times of high demand in the market and in the NEM, that's where there can be, for example, in Queensland in January, they got to a level 2 of a possible level 3 in terms of demand capacity, where they weren't too far off from, certain areas basically having to be switched off from power due to the high demand. So it's something that's going to become more and more apparent as well, as time goes on, and it kind of shows that the grid that we've got right now is a bit outdated, and there's a fair bit of investment that needs to go into it to be able to, I guess, have a little bit more continuity and reassurance in the grid to make sure that these things, or try and avoid these things as much as possible.
does that imply, Alex? Does that imply, Alex, that a significant investment in the grid is needed, whatever energy source we go with leading forward, on the assumption that coal will phase out?
Yeah, that's right. So especially from a renewable transition, nuclear, I don't know enough about to understand if there's an upgrade needed, but from a renewable perspective, yeah, there's new cables that need to be put into the ground. There's upgraded from grids that need to be done in accordance to make sure that the transition is as smooth as possible. Right now, we've got a pretty unstable grid, especially around summer when we get a lot of feed-in back into the grid. There is a bit of instability there that it just means that the grid's not up to scratch right now to deal with any sort of 100% renewable target or anything like that. So it's still a while away. If that's it for those questions, I'll go into this next slide here, which basically shows a bit of an overview of all the services that we provide, working well and working together to be able to provide a really good outcome for a customer. So this is Recycle, and this is one of our partnership associations that we work with, the Victorian Waste Management Association, VWMA. Essentially, this is everything working together. So we were able to install 3 solar systems on 3 of their sites, totaling 260 kilowatts, and that looked to save, and will continue to look to save them 70 grand per year across the lifetime of those systems, coupled with the $140,000 government rebate, which I touched on earlier as well. Those go down each calendar year, so that wouldn't be as much now as it was then, but still something to take note of, that the government will pay you to install a system as well. What we were also able to do is identify savings in the electricity rates that they were paying. So we went to tender for their 4 electricity contracts, secured more competitive rates than what the business was able to do themselves, and looked to save them a little over $9,000 a year across the 3 years over the contract term for those 4 sites, compared to what they were previously paying on their contracts. So that goes back to my point that I made earlier around time in the market's super important, and to have an expert, I guess, understand with you as well the complexities around not only time in the contracts, but your contract terms and lengths. If you leave it until the last minute and might time your contract at an inopportune moment, then maybe it's best to sign a 6-month or a 12-month contract and look to renegotiate at a better time. It's those kinds of things that can really help you with helping save money on something that, look, you're going to be paying for your power anyway. You may as well pay a little bit less for it. And so these are easy things that are not, they're things that, proactive businesses are looking at. But then again, it's a hard thing to do yourselves for a lot of businesses because they just don't have the bandwidth, time, or resources to do these things. And that goes to my last point in terms of network tariff reviews and a demand reset. So on the network tariff, I'm not too sure if people know of a network tariff is, but you basically pay network charges, and they're the poles and the wires that supply the electricity. The retailers more or less just slap a brand on the electricity and will charge you for it that way. But the poles and the wires are what actually help get the electricity to your site. Now, if you're on the wrong network tariff, the network won't actually tell you that there's a cheaper tariff out there for you. It's up to you to conduct your own review. And so it's very hard for a business that is focusing on other things and more prioritizing other things, so you should be, then understanding if their network tariff's the right one for them. So we conduct that with all of our large commercial customers to understand if they are on the right network tariff and help them find savings, like we did for Recycle here. The network tariff and demand reset review was able to save them a further 30 grand per month. So you're looking at over $300,000 a year just from conducting a review that the network wasn't going to tell them about it, but we were able to do that work for them and got their bills down from 38 grand to $6,600 a month. So it's an enormous difference where you can have all of these things working together to essentially, you know, when you're looking at a $30,000 decrease in your monthly electricity bill, obviously this is a perfect world scenario. This isn't going to be the case for all businesses, but you don't know what you don't know. And it's really important to understand that you should be contesting all the charges that you are receiving. So, for example, we work with Romeo's Retail Group. They're an IGA chain in New South Wales and South Australia. We found that through our bill validation service that they were getting overcharged $50,000 over a 4-month period from their retailer. It's something that they wouldn't have noticed themselves. It's something that the retailer didn't even notice. Our AI systems picked it up for them, and the $50,000 was credited back onto their bill. It's these kinds of things where it's pretty difficult to be able to do manually from a business's point of view. So to be able to put your trust in a business that does this every day enables you to focus on other things, but can also lead to some serious savings considering you're paying for your power anyway. So why pay more than what you have to? So how the process works in terms of enabling us to essentially have a look at, are there ways that we can reduce what you're doing now and help you pay a little bit less on your electricity bill? So our energy assessments are free. There's no obligation to proceed. All we need is a copy of the most recent electricity bill to get started, to see if there's anything that we can do for you right here and now. And that's the same goes for whether it be procurement and sorting out your next contract or commercial solar viability. The first step is having a look at the electricity bill. And that third point there, as I said, you're under no obligation to proceed. So it's rare that we can't actually help someone. So whether that's identifying savings, identifying an opportune time to secure their next contract if it's not right now, seeing that solar can be cash flow positive for them from day one, all of these things we're able to identify, and it's not going to cost you anything to actually see if you can be, your position can be optimized. And so there's my details there as well. Feel free to get in touch, whether on email or mobile. I'm pretty available throughout the day to have a chat. All of you are going to have different scenarios and circumstances when it comes to your different contracts and sites and usage times, everything like that. So you're all going to be different with the rates that you're paying as well. So it's going to be a case by case basis to see, can we help you right now, or are we best to look at helping you down the line, but providing you with as much information as possible so that you guys can make the most informed decisions for your businesses and make sure that the operational cost of energy isn't something that you're overpaying for. Because hopefully this little presentation that I've gone through identifies that the energy bill that you're paying now doesn't need to be the energy bill that you pay for the rest of your time there. There are opportunities to reduce that bill, and there are opportunities that actually really, one, aren't going to cost you a lot, but two, they're not going to hinder how you guys operate day to day as well, which I think is most important too. I'll leave that up a little bit longer for if anyone wants to take a screenshot or anything like that of my details there. But that's me done. I'll open the floor if there's any other further questions beyond that.
Alex, just before, do you mind if we share this on our website, your presentation, so that people will be able to contact you? Whether you want to change that front page or not before we do that, would be, yeah, we're happy to upload that onto our website, so your contact details will be there permanently. Plus, this was recorded, this presentation. So if we are able to get your permission to, we'll edit that, obviously, share that as well, that would be really good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll leave it.
I spoke with Alan yesterday, and yeah, you had my permission for this to go up
Excellent.
and be shared around.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So it's now the opportunity for anyone to ask questions. I'm going to throw in a wish list question just to kick it off, Alex. The nature of our businesses is we're typically, most of our businesses, not all, we're ticking along using a level of energy which varies a little but not a lot, except when we've got to prepare a batch of molten metal, and then our energy use spikes. We use a lot of energy to prepare molten metal, and then we turn that off and we're pouring that metal and doing other things. But we get charged for that peak demand, which we only use for a small amount of time. Is there any likelihood, possibility that method, that the way that the whole thing's set up is going to change any time in the future, or is that something, forget about that, that's a pie in the sky thing that's never going to change?
I think it touches briefly on that demand response that I alluded to with the recycle case, is that you're all going to have in your electricity bill a section of demand charges. We can review those to see if there's any possibility that we can reduce that demand charge for you, or reduce that capacity demand. Short answer would be it's a pie in the sky wish list. But that's not to say that there aren't opportunities that we can explore and avenues that we can explore to see if we can work with the retailer and work with the network to identify opportunities to look at reducing that cost for you.
Yeah.
So
okay, thanks.
I'll interject a little bit, Alan. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, go.
It is a matter of looking at whatever because not only have you got a retailer, but in all of the individual states will have their own the old poles and wires. What in SA is SA Power Networks. I don't know what it is in some of the other states. Would it be Ergon or whatever? So the bill is an aggregate of charges for the electricity itself through the market, AMO charges, which are market charges. Now, for our site, on a 12-month moving figure, our market charges are roughly between 48 and about 55%. So it's a huge amount of fixed cost, regardless of how much energy we're doing. But one of the things that you can do, and it comes back to how they're running the market. They're saying, okay, well, if as a foundry you used on one particular day 4 meg, then as a provider, I need to have 4 meg there available for when you want it. So even though you might have only done that for 14 minutes in the 1 year, you're going to get charged for that because arguably the market needs that 4 meg. So understanding when or how you can modify that 4 meg and arguably use it over a longer period and outside of peak periods. So certainly in SA, and I think it's also Victoria and New South Wales, the peak period, there's a summer peak period, which is the 1st of November till the end of March. And it's between, I'm trying to get it right now, 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. Your demand charge for the year is set based on that, because that's the peak period of the year. all the air cons go on, that's where the majority of the market is set. That's when the majority of all the generators need to be on to be able to supply and not have blackouts. For the other, 5-6 months of the year, a lot of the generators are going to sit doing bugger all because they're not needed. So we just ensure that we don't, we basically turn our furnaces off as best we can in that peak period over those that 4-hour period. So if you were, I really need to get this out, and you're going to use that, you're going to get your pay through the nose for it for the balance of the year. So understanding how the market's going to set and what times they really are going to look at, you need to understand that and act accordingly. One of the things I was going to ask Alex is also then, I know in other markets, Germany, for instance, companies like foundries that are going to be big power users in a period will do a deal with the retailer or the city, whichever one's at point, and say, okay, between 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 7 p.m, we will reduce our power from 10 megawatts down to 2 because we know all the kids are getting home, the people are getting home, they're turning the power on or whatever, and they'll get a lower tariff on that basis because they'll work with them to do that. Is our market arguably mature enough to have those conversations?
That's a really, really good question. My short answer would be, I don't think so, just because the reality with, say, coal, for example, is that it's hard or borderline impossible to just switch on and off. So in terms of being able to reduce the supply of coal and increase the supply of coal, for example, there's challenges behind that. Whereas with other sources, it's easier to, whether it's switch on, switch off, and the like. I am going to do some investigation as to if there's anything that basically the commercial contract guys know of those sorts of deals being set in place. I do know, for example, for businesses that are on what's the term? I've drawn a blank. But
demand response sort of stuff.
Nah, it's basically when you're on the spot on spot rates. That's so businesses that are on spot rates. If, for example, the spot price goes through the roof, then there's certain contracts that businesses have with retailers that the retailer will inform them that the spot price is about to go up an extortionate amount and to reduce their power consumption if they can. So there's that kind of thing that goes into it. That's probably a little bit different to what you're asking. But I will ask that question and see if anyone does know about if there's if our grid is mature enough to handle those types of, I guess, complex arrangements.
Because the concept, I guess, I'm thinking of is the retailer will have purchased a certain amount of kilowatts, megawatts, or whatever to at least to be able to have a back-to-back with whoever their customer base is. So if, let's say, for instance, they purchased that power at $100 a megawatt, and they're selling it on for 150, whatever the numbers are, doesn't really make any difference. But they know that the spot rate, because I notice the spot rate right now across the NEM is over 300. So because we're in that sort of period where lots of people are getting home and power usage is going up. So if in essence they could say, okay, well, look, as Gary Savage's foundry is going to say, okay, I'll turn off and reduce it by a megawatt, and you can on-sell that, then surely there's a gain to be made for both parties. Number one, he doesn't get penalised and potentially get some of that saving. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
there's
a conversation to be had there. When you do sort out your contracts with your retailer, what the retailer will do, and if I'm teaching you how to suck eggs here, please just rebut. But the retailer will essentially say, if you buy, you sign a 4-year contract and your estimated usage is 2 gigawatts, whatever it might be. The retailer will then purchase enough electricity for that 4-year term to supply you. So if that if that agreement's in place of, hey, we're going to be using, I don't know, mate, for sake of argument, we're going to be using 1 megawatt of power an hour each day as part of our contract, but between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. we're going to reduce that to half a meg. Can we get a better rate on that you can on sell then to your power? Then I can't see why it's not a discussion to have.
Yeah, well, it is a discussion we've had, and without success for the last 15 years, I must say.
Yeah.
Hence the reason we're on a spot price.
Yeah. Do you know what the constraint has been?
I think a willingness to take arguably the risk, and yet we've got evidence over at least 10 years that, well, here's all of our data that shows that we can turn off in less than a second and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, I think it's just, that's arguably why I said it was a maturity, because I just don't think, based on that risk, as you're aware, pricing's based on a futures market, which hasn't got a real correlation necessarily with a true cost. It's someone's pie in the sky as to what they think that might happen. Anyway, it was more a discussion as to, okay, if we can start the conversation and move it along, businesses like ours, which can arguably move that usage of power around, if they know that there's not going to be either a penalty or there's going to be some benefit, arguably sort of levels out the load away from when the market is under pressure, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. It's an interesting conversation, and certainly one that I'm going to have with the guys there to understand if there's opportunity there. Because I mean, everyone wins in that case.
Correct.
If that can be done. So, well, that's from a very broad surface level talking about it. But in a perfect world, everyone would benefit from those sorts of contracts being in place. So, it's at least a discussion point from our point of view.
Alex, over to you, Chris. You go, Chris.
Just a quick one, and this may not be the ideal forum for this particular question or point. One of the things that we've done at Bradcan, and I know a lot of the other people around the room have had done, is what's called an energy audit, and had energy specialists come in and give you this hit list of ways you can save electricity and gas usage, VSDs, on your inverters on your welding machines, etc., etc. Our side here is not a foundry; it's an engineering workshop. But I guess my question is, we had this report, we had a series of meetings after it. We've got transition to carbon neutral goals, and and looking at our energy use all the time and sustainability meetings, etc. But what do people do around the room, or what do you suggest we do? We've got this old report, which is a little bit dated, but we're not having our regular meetings anymore. It's like lost its impetus. I mean, we're doing things on lights and other stuff like that. But is there any sort of general recommendation, not just from yourself, Alex, but from the room, in terms of reinvigorating this kind of drive?
I'll let others answer that. You guys would know better than me how you guys work in your four walls.
I guess we've looked at the same thing, and we've now got to the point where we're going a little bit more left of centre, like storing excess energy in silica sand, for instance, and whatever, which is going to be a lot more R&D and the like. So I think to some extent, if you look at what you can do to actually reduce that power usage, get more efficient motors and stuff, you can only do that progressively and continue to report to it. That I don't think there are any silver bullets, and arguably, without trying to be too cute, bean counters rule the world, regardless of how sexy the Greens think they are. At the end of the day, if there isn't a payback, your bean counters aren't going to agree to it, no matter what the strategy says. So it does need to make some sense. Hence the reason, if you can work with your retailer to move your power usage to bits that help the market overall, and you can get some benefit, you arguably got some payback then to be able to do something. Certainly, that's what we've looked at. We can't make, because we're on a spot price, we can't make solar make sense. And this is not trying to have a go at Alex. On a retail contract, if we were, I would have no doubt that we get a payback. But because we're on spot, we don't get to have that sort of benefit of that margin, we say. So solar for most places, I think would arguably make some sense, particularly for that sort of base load that whether you're pouring or you're not pouring, you're going to have. If the solar can be there for that sort of period, then that would be ideal, I think. Other than that, VSDs and the like, and all the stuff that most of us have continued to do progressively as they get replaced is about the only thing that we've come up with.
Brett, just a question for you. When you say you can turn your furnaces off in less than a second, how long do you have to have it off for to maintain your production?
One of the benefits of being in SA, the basket case that it is, and the blackout we had as a state quite a few years ago, was proof that we were off for just over 5.5 hours, and other than tilting all 4 of the furnaces, we turned them back on, and there was no issue at all. So we had lost in that period with the lids down, I think about 300 degrees. So it wasn't super significant. So, and in most cases, when the price spikes, reasonably often it's for a 5-minute period, and then it'll come back down and it'll go back up, etc., etc. Sometimes it's a bit more lengthy, particularly in those 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. and particularly over summer. But winter's not much different. I think AEMO have a tendency of allowing generators to do a lot of maintenance over winter, this sort of period. And of course, there's the wind is a lot, even though rainy and all sorts of stuff. The wind is a lot more fluky. It's not quite as consistent as it is in summer, and there's not as much sun. So there's a bit of a blip. So I can tell you that the maximums today across the NEM, between the low point is $405 a megawatt and the high is $911. So for us, as soon as it peaks at 320, instantly turn off, because it makes no sense. And in most cases, the next 5 minutes it comes back down and the power automatically goes back on, and our operators, other than having a flashing light to advise that there's not a breakdown, they don't really notice it. It doesn't have that much of an impact, certainly not compared to what the financial impact. Most people also wouldn't know, because they've got a retail contract, that the peak cost per megawatt is $16,500. I'll just say that again, 16,000 for the same goddamn megawatt that at other times you get paid $1,000 to use it. So it's minus 1,000 to a positive 16,500. That's why the retailers go, how the hell do you want me to take this risk? Anyway, so for us, it has very, very little impact, and arguably the way in which and it was just by luck, not good management, I must say, our rostering is a 10-hour shift starting at 6, finishing at 4, and the night shift starts at 8 p.m. So when we're busy, we run 12-hour shifts. So it's just by luck that sort of peak usage or pricing period, we can automatically say, well, we've got no one on site. We don't have to have the furnaces already pre-loaded for night shift. If we have to wait an hour when the prices are down, so be it. So for us, we don't lose virtually any temperature at all in a 5-minute increment. We probably lose 50 to 80 degrees, depending on where in the cycle it is, when it's sort of 15 to 20 minutes. So not that bad at all. We use just in medium frequency induction furnaces. Others will have different issues, but it's not an issue for us, Kieran.
Yeah, thanks, Brett.
No worries.
All right. We seem to have dried up on the questions. I I'll give everyone a last chance to jump in. I'd like to understand a bit about nuclear, but it's not a question for you, Alex, but a comment. I'll make a comment. We've had many presentations from the likes of Tennant Reid, from the Australian Industry Group, and others, and we've heard it from the EUAA, Energy Users Association of Australia. Nuclear is by far the most expensive form of way to generate electricity. Tonight you've told us that what's being proposed is only a very small percentage, relatively, of the total daily need. I just don't understand the strategy they're using there. But anyhow, that's a comment, not for anything else.
I did try to do a little bit of digging. All the evidence suggests that it's going to be more expensive. Well, it's the most expensive form of power in terms of, you know, setting up the reactors and whatever it might be, whatever's involved with nuclear. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on that, but all the evidence suggests that it's expensive. So I'm not 100% sure, but it's going to be a very interesting couple of weeks, I think, following that, because he's yet to Peter Dutton's yet to talk about the cost of it, so that'll be an interesting one.
Okay. Yeah, and look, the issue I think he's trying to push is that the renewable energy, whether it be solar or wind, in terms of the underlying costs, is understated, particularly for the poles and wires, because, and I think there's been enough feedback from a range of individual, of the constituents that who wants a goddamn wind farm in their farmland or solar, farms, because they're gargantuan. By the same token, which individual is going to say, yeah, I want that nuclear reactor in my backyard? At the end of the day, what I think for most of us, probably other than Amber, who's only about 23 years old, what all of us need to bloody remember is that all of our state governments and federal governments have sold us the absolute rubbish, that they sold all their goddamn assets, or the majority, to private enterprise because we're going to be better off overall. So, 25, 30 years ago, when they should have been putting more generation in, they decided, no, private enterprise will do it. Unsurprisingly, you think private enterprise, they're after a profit, that's right. So if there's less generators, prices go up, supply and demand. I wonder who would have ever thought of that. And now the politicians are putting their hands in the air. And, they come out with this other rubbish about nuclear. Well, where were they 30 years ago when there was more generation that was required? Electricity is a bloody essential service for all of our constituents, not just business. So if the government thinks they're going to have an old bugger like me forget that they sold us a pup, they're bloody kidding themselves. Anyhow.
Yeah. All right. Okay, it's just on 7. I think we can. Amber, do you want to wrap it? Oh, Gary's ready to go. Do you want to wrap it up, Amber, or do you want me to wrap it up? Or
well, look, thank you so much, Alex, for your time tonight and for your interesting presentation. It certainly generated pardon the pun, a fair bit of and I didn't even mean that, a fair bit of conversation amongst us, and has given us a lot of things to talk about and think about as individual business owners and managers, but also I think potentially as an organisation, as a not-for-profit organisation representing a group of businesses that are extremely high energy users, and how we can maybe help our membership, maybe by creating a checklist with some of the things that you've spoken about, hints to look at, do's and don'ts when negotiating contracts. Maybe we can help them put together something, but also, of course, put them in touch with you. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for your time tonight after hours. Thank you for your presentation and allowing us to be able to share your presentation and popping it on our website. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks,
Thank
everyone,
you,
for
Alex.
having me tonight.
Just a quickie,
that's a
I've put a link there to a YouTube video on the modular nuclear, which I was impressed with a while ago.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Worth
Thanks so much,
exploring
Chris.
that. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Just before we go, I just want to remind Gary, because you're here in Victoria and there's a couple of people floating around who've got their cameras off. We have our next meeting in July down at Geelong at Manufutures, the Manufutures Automation, which is at the Deakin University. That'll be a tour there, and we'll also have a presentation from our very own Richie Smythe after the tour. So keep an eye out for a notice with regard to that, and that's on July the 17th, and it'll be probably a 5:30 start. Details will be out shortly. So thank you all very much for attending. I hope you've learned as much as what I certainly have. My mind's a little bit boggling over all of that, but I'm sure we'll work our way through it. There's so much, and we'll never get to the end of that. There'll always be some mystery, no doubt, in relation to this topic. So, Alan, unless you've got anything else to say, I will thank you all for attending.
Nothing all from me.
Thanks,
Okay,
guys.
thanks everyone.
Okay,
See you.
thank you.
Bye.
See you all later.
Bye.
Bye.